Well, he's getting to it right now on Capitol Hill. That's former CIA Director John Brennan testifying. He's in front of the House Intelligence Committee. The subject, Russian interference in our presidential election. Let's hear what he has to say.
Entirely consistent with the main judgments contained in the January classified and unclassified assessments, namely that Russia's goals were to undermine public faith in the U.S. democratic process, denigrate Secretary Clinton and harm her electability and potential presidency, and to help President Trump's election chances. Let me conclude by saying that it was a very special privilege to serve as a CIA officer for the first 25 years of my public service. And it was the highest honor of my professional career, and always will be, to have served another 4 years as director of CIA. CIA officers of all disciplines, past, present, and future, serve this country and their fellow citizens with tremendous dedication, talent, and courage. They recognize that this country's national security rests heavily on their continued outstanding work and on the sacrifices they and their families make every day on behalf of their fellow citizens. We all owe a great debt of gratitude to all CIA officers and their families for what they have done and continue to do to protect this country. And I will now be pleased to take your questions.
Well, again, Mr. Brennan, thank you very much for your long service, distinguished, and for agreeing to come this morning. I'm joined on our task force by two able prosecutors who I'd like to yield my 5 minutes to Tom Rainey. Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Director, if you could just take a quick minute before I start with my line of questioning with regard to what happened last night in Manchester, to do whatever you can, the best you can from your expert opinion, to try to reassure the American people that what we do in this country and what we're trying to do would help thwart and stop any kind of similar activity here in the future. If you could help try to put American minds at ease briefly, I would appreciate any words that you might have of advice.
Well, I would say that ISIS and Al-Qaeda and their terrorist affiliates continue to try to carry out these outrageous attacks in Europe as well as the United States. But I can say with great confidence that this country has the absolute best counterterrorism community that knits together the experts from intelligence, law enforcement, homeland security, and does a great job of making sure that our federal structure is interoperating as best it can with state and local officials and local law enforcement. And so I have seen a tremendous growth of capability, as well as an enhanced national architecture since 9/11 in terms of the ability to share counterterrorism information quickly, terrorist threat information, so that when it's collected overseas or wherever, it gets to those individuals who have to take action on it. So I can assure the American people that I know today my former colleagues are working even harder than they ever have before to prevent attacks.
Thank you, sir. And to the matter at hand, we heard the ranking member speak in his opening, as well as we've heard in the press numerous times with regard to, and in your opening statement, the Russian investigation, what the Russians were trying to do with regard to our election, the Russians interfering with our election, whether it be through the RT or propaganda or whatever. We know that that has now unfortunately become the new norm and something that we're all going to have to deal with. And our charge on this committee isn't so much necessarily to try to seek out and root out criminal behavior, especially now in light of the new special counsel, Robert Mueller, who would be looking into those type of things. But for us on the intelligence committees, whether it be here or in the Senate, to try to improve the intelligence community's ability to do our jobs and to make a report, a recommendation to you and the new administration as to how we better defend ourselves against what Russia and or others may be trying to do with regard to affecting our republic and our democracy. And in doing so, if we do find any kind of criminal behavior, I think that the minority would agree that those type of that type of information would be referred to the Justice Department, which is the proper jurisdiction. But with regard to the main question at hand, in your experience with the Russian trying to involve themselves in our election, did you ever find any evidence, as the ranking member spoke of collusion while you were the director, did you find direct evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Putin in Moscow while you were there?
Mr. Rooney, I never was an FBI agent. I never was a prosecutor, so I really don't do evidence. I do intelligence throughout the course of my career. As an intelligence professional, what we try to do is to make sure that we provide all relevant information to the Bureau if there is an investigation underway that they are looking into criminal activity. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I was convinced in the summer that the Russians were trying to interfere in the election. And they were very aggressive. It was a multifaceted effort. And I wanted to make sure that we were able to expose as much of that as possible.
But was there intelligence that said that the Trump campaign was colluding with Moscow during their campaign?
There was intelligence that the Russian intelligence services were actively involved in this effort. And having been involved in many counterintelligence cases in the past, I know what the Russians try to do. They try to suborn individuals. And they try to get individuals, including U.S. persons, to act on their behalf either wittingly or unwittingly. And I was worried by a number of the contacts that the Russians had with U.S. persons, and so therefore, by the time I left office on January 20th, I had unresolved questions in my mind as to whether or not the Russians had been successful in getting U.S. persons involved in the campaign or not to work on their behalf, again, either in a witting or unwitting fashion. And so, therefore, I felt as though the FBI investigation was certainly well-founded and needed to look into those issues.
When you talk about, and I'm running out of time, but hopefully I'll be able to circle back, can you describe their capabilities beyond just propaganda and actual infiltrating, whether or not there was, you had intelligence to infiltrate the campaign with capabilities beyond just propaganda and beyond just reaching out or trying to influence the news or the campaign, and how long have we known about these type of capabilities?
There's a lot of intelligence that's been built up over the years about Russia's MO in terms of trying to gain influence in Western democracies, how they've been able to use individuals, they've been able to use politicians, political parties, they've been able to use elements within the media to try to make sure that their objectives are realized. And so, again, knowing what the Russian MO is and has been, including in elections in Europe, I certainly was concerned that they were practicing the same types of activities here in the United States. And that's why, as I said, we set up a group in late July that included the FBI and NSA. I wanted to make sure that every information and bit of intelligence that we had was shared with the Bureau so that they could take it. It was well beyond my mandate as director of CIA to follow on any of those leads that involved U.S. persons. But I made sure that anything that was involving U.S. persons, including anything involving the individuals involved in the Trump campaign, was shared with the Bureau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's the former CIA Director John Brennan, of course, threading the needle pretty carefully there. He said Russia